Welcome into the Illini Inquirer podcast. And I don't want to go all John Rothstein here, but it is March. It is March. It is here. And Illinois basketball enters March on the 1 seed line, though a huge week ahead. And your number one guy is day to day. We just chatted with Brad Underwood about that. But Jake Hansen is coming back. I didn't think that was actually a thing that could happen, but he got an NCAA waiver to pull his name out of the draft 2 months after declaring, and more than a month and a half after the deadline for that. So Brett Bielema gets a boost. The sun is shining. The snow is melting. Good morning, Michael Carpenter. It is March.
Oh, if you would have told me before the season started, a Big Ten title was top of my mind, but I'll trade a 1 seed for that. And you have it right in front of you. You know, you have a week where if you win one of these games, and we know which one's probably more likely of the two, if you win one of them, you have probably locked up that fourth 1 seed, regardless of what happens in the Big Ten tournament. So the fact that this team is in this position, and also, you know, for all the memorable wins that they've had this year, that Wisconsin one on Saturday's up there. I thought that there were so many things that we could unpack from that game, short-term, long-term for this team. And I noticed, by the way, I even got a shout-out in you and Joey's podcast. You guys went macro first.
You went huge macro. You'd be so proud of us, Cart, because sometimes I feel like you miss the micro of these games. Like, so when you're 9-5 or you lose a game here against Baylor, but for me at that point, you had so much youth and you competed with them for all but like a couple minutes. I'm like, I think this team's pretty good still. Like I was almost more encouraged after that Baylor game. The Maryland game, not so much, right? Like the Ohio State game, I thought, no, Ohio State's pretty good. I don't know if you're going to regret that loss at the end of the year. But that game to me was all macro. To me, that was, you know, you found a way to win a sloppy, ugly, scary game when you didn't play your A game and you didn't have your star, right? You found a way to win without the guy who's not going to be there next year. And for me, you know, we could talk about even for the short term. For me, like if Io has an off game or Kofi gets into foul trouble, you know, you have a program. Like you have other guys who can step up and make plays. And the theory, of course, going around is that should help them. Like, hey, DeMonte Williams, maybe he's more aggressive. Andre Curbelo, maybe he's more assertive offensively. Or Adam Miller, maybe more assertive offensively when Io comes back. But I just think for the long term, that just tells you Brett Underwood's program not going to be as good next year. Like this is one of those great years. You know, we'll see what happens in the tournament, but this is one of the great years you're going to have. Like Illinois doesn't get in contention for 1 and 2 seeds that often, even when they're really good, and they're not in conversations for the Big Ten championship that often, even when they're really, really good. Like the 2000s, I just don't know if runs like that's going to happen again. So, but you're probably still going to have a team, Carp, that's going to be comfortable in the NCAA tournament, right? You're probably going to have a team that's going to be in the top 25 for parts of the season or maybe most of the season. And I thought that was so encouraging. I just thought you had a tough-minded program that has players who make plays.
I spoke with Corey Bradford yesterday. I spoke with him about his freshman year as he comes in, and he sat out a year, and that would have been the year that Illinois won the Big Ten title in '98 with all those seniors. And he said that was an invaluable year for him. And he wasn't even playing at that point, but the words like culture and identity and things like that John Gross is never quite able to figure out. It does feel as if there is a sort of, you know, mantra that this team and this program, they follow, regardless of if they're freshman or junior, senior. And to see Andre Curbelo, specifically to start with him, he's an alpha dog, and he will be plenty comfortable being the guy. And God knows he is the most marketable face on this team other than Io and Kofi. And I think for the foreseeable future, that's your face. And he loves that. I noticed today.
He even said it today. Like he loves those. Like he loves big moments, and I think he really enjoys like press conferences. Carp, it's like you're talking to a 25-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
Right? He almost answers questions too long, so much that we couldn't get to our questions today in like 25 minutes with him because he's just he's a veteran. He's got a lot of maturity to his approach, and he loves it. Like he wants that shine.
Yeah, which is great. And then Adam Miller, I think, 6 points on Saturday, 2 or 3 shooting. And I wish he would have shot more, but he's a great rebounder. He's a really good defender. He's got a polish to his game right now and a confidence to his game that I think was maybe lacking a month ago. So the short-term, long-term benefits of this, short-term the next month. You got guys like Curbelo and Miller that clearly feel more comfortable. You mentioned DeMonte, and as a fifth-year senior, it's amazing how it feels like he was so passive for about a month, and then the 2 games where I was out, he goes for 8, he goes for 12. And he still has a great shot. He's still shooting 56% from three. Shoot it, DeMonte. And he is the step back baseline 18-footer. What? But
he had that in his arsenal, and he did it twice, and he traveled twice, by the way, but he did it twice and found a way to hit it. And then that like old man, like runner he's had the last 2 games, if he does that, like if he gives you when Io comes back, and we'll see. Brad said day to day, and there's Carp, like there's an injury he could have suffered, right? And if you're in the concussion protocol, it's about a week. And it's been a week since Michigan State. So I will not count that out. I don't know if I'm expecting him to play tomorrow, but I think there's a possibility maybe. We'll see what happens. Kind of get that Penn State kind of flavor. But like when Io comes back, like if DeMonte can give you 5 to 7, those are huge points that you haven't been getting for the past month.
What's great about that win Saturday is you have a bit of a luxury now tomorrow night. Not Saturday at Ohio State. Saturday, you got to be fully healthy. You got to go out there and get that win if you want that 1 seed, or if you want to lock it up without having to do work in the Big Ten tournament. But the game against Michigan, which I thought was maybe a long shot anyways, because I think rightfully so. They're number 2 in the AP poll now, right? They leapfrogged Baylor, as they probably should. But that's not a game that you need. And it's a game where if Io doesn't play, we can sit. I feel rather unencumbered as a fan. I can watch it. How do we do? Probably going to lose, but it wouldn't surprise me the way this team's playing right now that if they compete for most of it. And I think that all this year, it's been easy, and myself included, to get sucked into these moments where they've been messy, where they haven't been good, and then kind of lose the forest for the trees, right? And say, well, wait a second. Really what this team's identity is they have this toolbox of unique ways that they win games. And it isn't 04-05 in terms of the efficient offense and clean basketball. It isn't 01 where every single night they show up, but they just lose a few. Yeah, I know it's more up and down, but they win more games than not in very unique ways. And I think that may bode well for March, as long as you avoid the at Michigan State-like or the Maryland, the Ohio State-like performances. But it seems like when the lights are brightest, this team more often than not does respond.
They're not the prettiest team, and that's okay. Even though they're like top 10 offensive efficiency, which kind of gets lost in the,
I know,
in the 17th defensive efficiency. That's what I love. They're every night they play good enough defense, and that's what it was on Saturday. Except for the final 2 minutes where you survived one of the all-time
unbelievable
late barrages from Dimitri Trice, who made 2 easier shots. So there were some defensive issues, but then made like 3 of them. They were just like, okay, this guy's just hitting everything. Yet you still made 10 free throws in the final 45 seconds by Curbelo and Frazier and Grandison. And that's some balls there, Carp. Like there's some balls there to make those shots and to be confident in that moment. And for Williams to have that step back and be confident in that moment. And for the last 2 games, really to outplay 2 Big Ten teams. I know Nebraska's not good, and Teddy Allen's getting the heck out of there before the season's done. And Wisconsin is not great Wisconsin like we expected. But this is like, those are 2 big wins for a team that could have gone the other way. Like, oh, we're without Io, man. This thing could fall apart. No, it didn't.
Well, not just that after Tuesday night, the Big Ten title was essentially done. And I think they knew it too. And I was worried about Thursday night. I thought Nebraska's bad enough where you're going to get a win. I don't care about style points. Just get the win, and we'll see when Io comes back. And then he won by 16, and he controlled that game. The Wisconsin game, 21 turnovers. They shot 21 more times than you did, and still you won. And I did see a few people, not a lot, but a few, after that Wisconsin game saying, oh, man, we almost choked it away. No, let's be clear. That was not a near choke. That was I've never seen a player, not even a Reggie Miller, score 19 in 2 minutes, a banked 3. The last one that he made over Adam Miller, you could not have defended it better and not foul him. Hand in his face, kind of had an arm around him too. No call, as there shouldn't have been. But
and the one Trent was guarding him banked in. Like, what are you going to do? Like, there were some breakdowns. And listen, it was a really sloppy 20 turnover game. You should have been up by 20 points in the first half, right? Mm-hmm. Which would have been amazing. But the only thing holding you back was the turnovers. So there are things you can pick apart. But after a game like that, without Io, you go on the road. And Carp, Lante knows the house of horrors that is Kohl Center. I know there's not fans there, but to get a win there, that's a monster quad 1 win, and that ain't going away. And it just kept you in this mix to where, man, if you can pull off one of these wins this week, I think it's massive. I mean, Michigan, even with Io, Carp, And if he comes back as a masked man, what a moment that's going to be on national television if he's able to play. But even if he doesn't, it's going to be tough to beat Michigan regardless. I think if I had a bracket right now, I'd probably put Michigan in the title game, probably with Gonzaga. I really think Gonzaga is good, but I think I'm leaning towards Michigan winning just because they have no holes on that roster. But Ohio State, man, that team can beat Illinois as they showed. But when they were on this run, I kept going, Chris Holtman's doing a hell of a job because that's a good team with good players. And EJ Liddell is turning into a great player. But unlike Iowa, unlike Illinois, unlike Michigan, I just don't think they have that top 5 talent or even top 3 talent in the Big Ten. And I think it's starting to show a little bit. And I think their youth is starting to show. They need Dwayne Washington to be great because he's the one guy that can kind of go off scoring wise. I think they're beatable, even if Iowa weren't to play. But I think with the time they have, I think Iowa will be in that game. So that's the one I have circled this week.
Yeah, and I don't want to be a prisoner of the moment and look at the Iowa game at Ohio State yesterday and say, well, Ohio State stinks now. They don't. They're probably going to be a 2 seed regardless of what happens, and they deserve it because of all the big wins. But 3-game losing streak. And another reason why the Wisconsin win was so big for Illinois, because if you lose that, I don't care how good the opponents are. You don't want to potentially lose 3 in a row. And that would have been on the table if you didn't beat Wisconsin. So you avoided that. Meanwhile, with Ohio State, I think you hit it on the head there where EJ Liddell is a very good player, borderline first team All Big Ten. I know he's going to get some votes for it. Washington, really good scorer. And then you get all these nice pieces. But this is starting to look like the Ohio State team of early January. And when you talk about teams peaking, it's not who you play, it's when you play them. And we got them on the upswing in January as we were sort of in this malaise in mid-January. And now I think that the tables may flip a bit. I also love the fact that you get a game on Tuesday. They don't play all week. There is no palate cleanser for Ohio State. There's no get-right game. Essentially, they sit for 6 days, and it doesn't get any easier for them after the Iowa game. And meanwhile, we have a challenge where easy for me to say as a fan that I can go into the Michigan game saying, whatever. If you compete, I'm happy. And that is the truth. That is the truth. But I get the feeling that this team, that could be another confidence builder, even without a win tomorrow night at Michigan. And I just like the way that this week sets up for that Saturday afternoon.
It just so happens, Carp, that Illinois has its best team in 15 years and Michigan has its best regular season team ever.
Yeah.
This Michigan team surprised me that they were able to find upgrades over Teskey, upgrades over Xavier Simpson, and they are just loaded. Like 1 through 5 and 6, because Shawn D. Brown comes off the bench and probably would start for Illinois if he would have come here. Pretty amazing what they've been able to put together this year. So I agree. You go in with no pressure tomorrow, even though you are fighting for a number 1 seed. No one's expecting them to win, even though they are the number 4 team in the country going against the number 2 team. If Iowa returns, even if he did, I still think Illinois is a 5-point underdog. I think KenPom has him as a 7-point underdog, and I think that would assume Ayo Dosunmu would be available in this game. So you got nothing to lose and everything to gain, possibly to lock up a number 1 seed before you even play Ohio State.
Yeah, it would take a Herculean effort. And what will be fun to settle in is that 10% chance. If Iowa doesn't play, let's call it a 10% chance. And let's say if he does play, 1 in 3 chance of maybe squeezing the upset up in Michigan. But I think the bigger things we could take away from tomorrow, assuming that Iowa doesn't play, and you're right, it could be the Penn State situation. And if so, the nation will be watching, and that will be a moment. That will be a moment regardless of what happens. But I'm most excited to just kind of see more of what we saw Saturday, where you get Curbelo out there for 30 minutes a game because you have to, where you get Adam Miller continuing to do what he does. And just in terms of matchups, the Dickinson-Coburn matchup is amazing. It's going to be super fun.
How confident are you in that one? How confident are you in winning that one?
I think it's going to be a draw. I think that Dickinson is the more well-rounded player, right? But he's not quite the physical specimen that Kofi is. I think they're both going to get theirs, essentially. But I think you guys made the point on your podcast Saturday, because after that win, you just absorb all the Illini content you can. So I'm listening to that, just reveling in the victory. And I think about 40 minutes in, Joey might have said, oh, yeah, Kofi, right. We gloss over a 19-7 performance. That's a ho-hum Saturday for Kofi Coburn. I'm really excited to see him and Dickinson go against each other. And I think that Kofi is, in the last 2 games, I'm very impressed with having to be the lead producer on offense, he's stepped into it with no problem.
It's hard not to envision him for a junior season being that guy, isn't it?
Oh, I know.
It's hard not to, and he's got a decision. He'll declare as he should, get his feedback, but it's hard not to envision, what he could be as the lead guy. And I think he's shown the last 2 games he can be that on a really, really good team. And if he and Curbelo are together with Miller, and you add these other pieces around it, maybe you go out a transfer like Namari Burnett, that's a top 10 team. I mean,
Absolutely.
that's a team that can compete at the top of the Big Ten. I don't know if they'll win, given what Michigan is, given what Ohio State is, and Michigan State I think should be pretty good next year. And Purdue is probably returning everybody basically next year, which we don't think about Purdue enough. I don't think we talk enough about what
Fourth in the Big Ten.
They're doing right now is pretty amazing. Matt Painter should get Coach of the Year votes. Juwan will get it, but Matt Painter should get it. But I think that's kind of a reminder. The one thing I worry about with Kofi a little bit more is the foul trouble that he's had here a little bit recently. And then 2, he's been a little frustrated, understandably so. But I think tomorrow night he's going to get one-on-one battles, which I'm interested to see who wins that. I think it's a pretty even matchup, which says a lot about Hunter Dickinson because both those guys I think are playing at an All-American level.
Yeah, I think that is one reason I'm more looking forward to tomorrow because Michigan's so big that defensively they can just go one-on-one. You got Livers at 6'7", you got Eli Brooks at 6'5". I know the point guard is 5'10". Doesn't matter, he's amazing. But the length is the one thing that really concerns me about Michigan, and that goes for any matchup that you'd have in the NCAA tournament. And when we talk about, I know Sean Harrington said this, Corey Bradford has said this, that seeding doesn't matter as much as the matchups, and that's true. I do think, though, that if we're looking further down the road in the NCAA tournament, it's really this simple. You get a win this week because you want to avoid Michigan, Gonzaga, or Baylor in a potential Elite Eight matchup. That's it. And I look at anyone else on the 2 line and think, I'll take those guys over the top 3 because it is 1, 2, 3, and then everybody else get in line, Illinois included. So, yeah, it's a situation that it's easy for me to say not playing in the game tomorrow, that I can sit back, relax, and see what happens. I'm sure it's different in the locker room. I know that Underwood walked back a little bit the comment he made about, hey, we're going to play who they give us and we aren't going to back out of anything. Talked about all the respect in the world for Michigan today, but I bet there's a little bit of juice in that locker room for Illinois for tomorrow night.
I do think he's given a little juice to Michigan too. Just to be honest with you.
That's okay. It's okay.
Which, I could tell he was frustrated. That's why I asked, what are your frustrations? Like, exactly what are your frustrations? And I get it from that was a tough week, man. That was a really tough week to lose to Michigan State, those fouls that weren't called, for your best player to get hurt on what was a dirty play, and for the Big Ten not to suspend Sissoko for that, as far as we know. I think
or say anything.
Yeah,
and that's where I think the last flagrant 2, if I recall, was Alan Griffin, and there was a statement, whether it came directly from the commissioner or the Big Ten office, but there was a statement and there was a suspension, and
yeah, and I'm going to get into it. I recorded a podcast with Ira Weintraub, and he explains the Michigan part of it, that this was more the Big Ten rescheduling the Nebraska game before Michigan was cleared to come back. But at the same point, like, it just looked bad. Like, and I think the communication from the Big Ten has been so awful that it makes Michigan look bad here, and it makes them look like they're ducking Illinois at the time. Illinois is playing great, and Michigan could have looked like Baylor coming back. But credit to Michigan, they haven't. Right. Like they haven't, and they've been fantastic ever since then. I do want to add this, Carp. Iowa is streaking towards a 1 seed right now. Like, if Illinois falls twice here, Iowa is the team to look out for. And right now they aren't there. They're the number 3 or
top 3 seed, I think.
On the 2 line, they're in the top 3 there, right? But they are ending the season. The February Fran talk again was way too premature. They've beaten Rutgers, Wisconsin, Michigan State, which now looks like a good win, Penn State at home, now Ohio State. And I think they're going to win their last 2 games. That's going to give them at least one more quad 1 win. And I think they're going to go into the Big Ten tournament as a top 3 seed and be a very dangerous 3 seed. And hopefully it's Illinois and Iowa in that Big Ten semifinal in the tournament there. But they quickly are making a beeline for that 1 seed. So if Illinois slips up twice this week, I think Iowa is in a decent position to possibly get in front of Ohio State and Illinois.
Keep them at arm's length. That would be a buzzkill. And if you get the good matchups in the 2, and you happen to be in, well, I guess they would probably not put Illinois in a Big Ten team's region. So that No, but you would likely play them Saturday in the Big Ten tournament if this holds. And I'd love it. I actually think it's a favorable matchup for Illinois. I think it has been the last 2 years where Iowa's strength is that when they get hot, good luck. And you have yeah, right. But you have pretty good perimeter defense. And that's one thing where I think your athletic guards, Iowa is not super long. They aren't that much bigger than you are. So that actually, I'm so glad to have locked up that 2 seed, because you look at the path even for Michigan and the way those seedings are kind of set up now. I'm pretty sure that a Michigan State would be up there, or Purdue, which I want no part of Purdue right now. I really just don't want part of a Matt Painter team at this point of the year. And I know it looks easy for Iowa to win the next 2, but I'm still holding out that sliver of hope that we get a little February Fran. And I thought yesterday when Ohio State got within 4, I thought, well, here we go. They went on 11 run.
I just don't think Wisconsin has it in them right now, man. Like
Probably not.
Outside of that Trice thing, they looked awful. They looked awful against Illinois, and they just look mentally weak right now, which is odd to say about a Wisconsin team. But yeah, I mean, if it holds right now, if the standings held right now, you'd be in the same side of the bracket as what? Wisconsin, Maryland, Rutgers, and Indiana.
You'd get the winner as it holds, and it may not hold. That's a thing. But Rutgers, Indiana, I'll take that over. Let's say the winner of the Michigan State.
I think it'd be Maryland.
Yeah, I don't want either of those teams. And frankly, I don't want Michigan State for a couple of reasons. I think it's a bad matchup for the length that they have, and also for the fact that something bad always happens when you play them. So the Big Ten tournament is an afterthought to me. If we got a 1 seed right there staring you in the face, whatever happens next weekend is really just a cherry on top. And you can make it that way. And I think if not 100% lock it in, get close by beating Ohio State. Now, if Iowa wins out, and that includes a win over you in the Big Ten tournament, then it gets interesting, but we'll cross that bridge, I guess, if we get there.
Isn't it amazing? Like, we've had all of this roller coaster along the way, Carp, and no one expected Michigan to be this good.
Yeah.
But it's Illinois and Iowa fighting for a number 1 seed, in my opinion. Like, maybe Ohio State gets back into that if they beat Illinois, but it's pretty fitting, right? Like, those 2 rivals could be fighting for it in the Big Ten tournament. That's awesome. That's what we expected coming into this year.
Yeah, and now that your floor is probably a 2, when you look at the other teams that continue to lose beneath you, Villanova with the bad loss at Butler, I know they were vying for a 2 seed. So you have a little bit of cushion. And the other thing, too, is we could look at the schedule and say, oh, man, at Michigan, at Ohio State, and potentially a game against Iowa in the Big Ten tournament. Even this week, it'd be so easy to say, you know what, 0-2. I don't like these matchups. I don't like our chances. I think that's doing a disservice for what this team has done over these 24 games. There have been those moments.
You are the voice of reason, man.
Hey, like, turned over a new leaf.
It's like step back and like enjoying the moment. It's amazing to watch. It's coming from a source I didn't expect, though. I got to be honest.
Well, I got to set a good example for Isaac and Trevor. They're 11 years my junior. And here's the other cool thing too is, for you as someone covering the team, this has to be a unique thrill because you will likely get some major excitement and cool things to cover in March that you haven't been able to before. Maybe John Gross's first year, they probably should have went to a Sweet 16, but I digress. With these younger guys, they haven't really had a team to call their own. For me, 89 I was too young. I heard about it, and until 04, 05, it's kind of like the 85 Bears thing we talk about. I didn't experience it, so eventually I got tired of hearing about it. So for these younger guys, 04, 05, they were in 2nd or 3rd grade. It didn't mean as much to them. And now they get their own moment, I hope. And that's where, not to harp on this 1 seed thing again, but I know you don't hang a banner for it, but that's a tangible thing that you remember, getting that 1 seed. And just the idea of waking up Selection Sunday and feeling like you got that locked in, and then seeing that name pop up a year after you had the NCAA taken away. And I thought, man, a 6 seed would be great. We're talking a 1 seed. It's incredible.
That is a good way to put it, that the new generation has their team, right? And like a new generation of people in Chicago get to talk about Illinois basketball and get to think about, they have a good history. And then they start hearing about Dean Darren and then the 89 final on it. It's just, this is fantastic publicity for your program. Even if you lose at Michigan, this is a ESPN game where you get this national audience, and Illinois is going to be one of the major stories going into this. And I would assume returning with a mask on is one of the major stories. And Kofi Coburn and these freshmen coming up. It's finally you're back into that. And yeah, there's a lot of younger people, even on the beat that I'm with, that didn't experience that. The one hard part, Carp, is not a lot of us are gonna be able to cover the NCAA tournament. That's a shame. Is a lot of fans aren't gonna be able to experience it. on the road at these games. A lot of us media won't be able to cover it, but we still get to watch this. And it's still the fact that we're here, and I was thinking about this. I was going to ask Brad this later this week. It's about a year ago today, or a year ago next week, that the NCAA tournament was canceled. And I think all of that and not having that team and not allowing Andres Feliz to have that moment, not seeing Ayo Dosunmu potentially wave goodbye with a Sweet 16 run, right? I think that's made us all more appreciative of being able to watch this, being able to talk about this like we are, and just to experience this season, even if it's not the same kind of season.
I was watching the halftime, or right before the Iowa-Ohio State game, the CBS theme comes on, dun, 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 and like chills. Because I can picture 2 weeks from what would have been yesterday, I can picture that moment at 5 o'clock on that Sunday, music starts, and oh my God, it's back. It's back. And not only is it back, but, when we talk about Illinois basketball, I think as a fan base, we often feel as if, I say we, like I'm not lumping you in there, but, as a fan base, there's this borderline inferiority complex, or I should say this Murphy's Law thing, where we always feel like whatever can go wrong will go wrong. And it's easy to fall in that hole, but keep in mind, not putting a silver lining on a once in 100 years pandemic. But what that ultimately led to was another full season with Ayo Dosunmu. It is leading potentially to a 1 seed in the tournament, and it's leading to a much better chance to make a deep tournament run than you would have had last year. I'm not going to call it a silver lining given the gravity of what the pandemic is. But, for an Illinois fan base where, 04, 05, let's go to Indy, Chicago, St. Louis. Sometimes all the chips fall into place. You mentioned not many people being able to cover it in person, not many people being able to go over in Indy. But I can guarantee that the people that are in that stadium, it's going to be the Illinois fans that are paying $500 on secondary markets so they can get a nosebleed ticket at Bankers Life Fieldhouse. It is going to be a pro Illini crowd in every single game they play over there. So, all the stars are aligning in the most roundabout, weirdest way possible for this team. And I wish it hadn't taken something that traumatic to do that. But I think that's one more reason to just kind of focus on how lucky of a position it is to be here in the first place.
And to wrap this up, Carp, I do want to talk about Jake Hansen here for a second, because there's another part of this. Like, you hate to say silver lining of a pandemic that has killed 500,000 people in this country, right? We're not losing sight of that. But he's returning despite declaring for the draft 2 months ago. Like, somebody asked me about that possibility this morning. I'm like, that's not possible. No, it is. I was wrong. He got a waiver to come back. And Brett Bielema, instead of taking over a program that would absolutely, in my opinion, in a roster be at the bottom of the Big Ten, he returns 15 super seniors for an extra year of eligibility. And most of those guys are starters and key players on your team. We could go down the list. It's your starting quarterback, Brandon Peters. You have 3 starting offensive linemen who are returning, all who have had all Big Ten honors at some point. Isaiah Gay and Owen Carney. Carney entered the transfer portal, and then he came back. Jake Hansen's an all Big Ten player, your top playmaker on defense. Tony Adams, and then all your specialists, right? Including one of the best punters in the game, and Blake Hayes. You get all that back for an extra year, where I don't know if it means you're making a bowl game, but instead of being by far, I think, the bottom team in the Big Ten West, all of a sudden you have a very competitive roster in year one for Brett Bielema, where you can have a decent season, whether that's 5-7 with some close games, or making a bowl game, or getting 7 wins or something like that. You have like a jumping off, spot that's way better than some previous starts to tenures we've seen.
Oh God. The first years of Beckman, of Ron Turner, of Ron Zook, I think he had a combined 5 wins, probably 4, because I think Ron Turner was winless, and then the Cubitt year was sort of its own thing.
Lovey was 3-9, and I thought Lovey and Beckman actually had some pieces, and
they did
work.
Yeah, well, I mean, Beckman had basically the entire defense back from a top 10 defense nationally, or top 20. But yeah, I think that it's tricky when we talk about sports. These are for fans a diversion, and it's entertainment for the most part, and it pales in comparison to the larger things going on. But out of all the athletic programs that have been maybe hurt or hamstrung by something like this, talk about making lemonade out of lemons for Illinois basketball and football. And it is a rare position. All these things I was actually thinking about. If Lovey had not beaten Wisconsin, and he gets fired, and you go into this coaching search a year early going into COVID-19. You have a new coach, and then the COVID-19 impact year happens, and then you're just kind of stagnant, right? There's no way that you really could have done much of anything. Well, no, instead you bring Lovey back, and now you have Brett Bielema, a proven commodity, as your head coach. Not saying it's a guarantee it's going to work out, but man, at the end of the day, as Illini fans, it's very easy to go down this sort of rabbit hole of, God, we got screwed again. Io got a broken nose, and we got screwed. Well, I tend to view it as, broken nose sucks, but it happened in the third week of February, not the third week of March. He's back. We're going to be fine. So I have turned over a new leaf.
Look at this.
How zen am I? How zen?
It's crazy. You get the vaccine, have a rough day or two, Carp, and then you're right back on it.
Hey, I mean, at the end of the day, though, and then you just lump in all the optimism just beyond sports. I mean, this will be a summer where you can hang out with people again. And even for some people, based on how your family is, who's vaccinated, there's going to be a selection Sunday where I'm hoping to be able to go to my parents' house, get the monocles, French dressing on the side, settle in like I did back in 04-05, the last time that Illinois got a 1 seed on selection Sunday. So there's all these markers that are like, wait a second, it's going to be okay. And for this Illinois basketball team specifically, I think there are more signs than not that they'll find a way. And I'm not saying national title. I'm not even saying Final Four, but I am more and more confident, especially after the last 2 games with what the supporting cast did, that this team is not going to flame out. No. They will probably end the season with a loss, but I would be surprised if it were one of those all-time Austin Peay kind of moments.
Carp, happy March. It's a happy March to start this with Illinois fighting for a 1 seed, Jake Hansen back, and enjoy. I know we're not there. We got pods before that, but enjoy that selection Sunday. That sounds like a good time.
Absolutely. And I'm going to enjoy this week. And hey, tomorrow night, whatever happens, happens. And in your gut, I know no inside information or anything, but in your gut, I'm telling myself Io's not going to play. But in my gut, I'm like, probably.
Derek Piper will be there. And I'm going to tell him to get there early because I'm wondering if he'll be working out kind of like he did against Penn State, just seeing if he's good to go. Maybe the doctor said already ruled this out. And from everything I heard, it was unlikely that he would play against Michigan, but you never know. I mean, Brad Underwood said day to day today, and he sounded more optimistic. And when he was asked like, hey, could Io benefit from this time off? He said, we'll see. We'll see. And that's about it. So
very cryptic.
So just leaving some crumbs there. But I think it adds a lot more drama, the possibility he could come back. But I'd be surprised if he wasn't available for Ohio State.
Yeah, it'd be a cherry on top at this point. And then feeling pretty confident that Saturday would happen. I thought it was encouraging that he went to Wisconsin in the first place.
Absolutely. Carp, have a great week, man. I'll talk to you.
All right, you too. Sounds good. We'll see you.